Okay, so we're gonna work on this painting today. We are working with a black and white image, and we're gonna call this our first painting in black and white. And we're gonna do techniques called tiling in this image. So we're gonna start with the idea of 2 layers first. So the first layer we're gonna do is paint the background. And in this case, this image is really complicated. So we're gonna call the background or the midtone like a 3. And the reason I say that is I have areas of really light and dark. I have light and dark. This is the dark. Oh, sorry, my finger's in the wrong place. Dark and light. But most of the image, it falls into the middle. So that's why I'm choosing to do that. So the first thing I do is I'm going to do a one-to-one copy. And I have traced out my box. And now I'm going to paint a midtone, a 3, over the entire box. And we did this before in the other layering painting. So I'm going to pause and then we're going to come back to that. I'm going to call, let's say, right here, the midtone. Let's see if I can't get closer on that image. So I decided that I want to call this a midtone. It's not in the dark, it's not in the light, it's somewhere between those two things. So when I'm mixing a midnote in this way, I'm going to lay down paint on top of my reference. And the key for doing this is to actually let it dry so that you can compare those two values. So I'm going to get my hairdryer out. Hopefully this is plugged in. And I dried it completely. And I just want to take a look at it and see if I can get my camera to focus. Oops. I think it looks okay. It's a little light, I would say, but I'm gonna trust the process. I'm gonna add actually a little bit of dark to it just to get it a little darker. All right, so once I do that, I'm going to add a little water with my palette knife so that it doesn't dry out. And I'm gonna paint this. This is I would say a 3. All right, so get my biggest brush out. Add a little water to the paint with the brush in it. Get the brush full of that 3 and lay it down. To me, it's looking too dark. So how am I going to fix that? Well, I'm just going to let it dry. And in the meantime, I'm going to mix up. I'm going to actually do a second box. Change the camera angle one more time. And just so that I have like an alternative if I decide that my mid-tone is too dark. And I'm going to actually add a little white to my mixture using a little bit more white. Here we go, like this. Okay, so let's try this one. So just see what happens, and we'll paint a second box. And it's a little dry, so I'm adding a little water. Getting it a little more. I feel like this one is a little better. So I'm pretty happy with this one. But just to make it, just to make sure, I'm going to do one more. And I always do this. I paint a lot of variations so that if I make a mistake on one, I can always fix it, especially for these films. It's really amazing how many times it's nice to have variations. So, okay, so I'm getting my brush back, and especially when the paint is wet. Now I'm going to do one that's even lighter. I'm going to mix a little bit more white with that. And we'll actually just get to decide which one we use. And then eventually there'll be times we'll need the other one, so we're not wasting anything. And so let's see, this is an even lighter version. And what I like to do is paint it out and then consult my value chart and see what numbers I will give them. And choose my best mid-tone. I like this one too. And that's pretty nice value. And then let's just do one more. Let's do just one more box. And we're gonna do one more lighter. So one of the things is when you use white or light color, it'll dry darker. But if you use dark colors, they tend to dry lighter. So by using black and white together, this is really challenging, even for me, to guess what's going to happen. And again, all pigments are different. And if we were using a different white or a different black, those are all things that you have to test out before you know what it's going to do, can predict what's going to happen. And it's a little bit frustrating, but also it's learning the personality of the paint that you're working with. So this is the first semester I'm using Himi Gouache in this brand, and these pigments, not all the pigments, but certainly the coal black and their titanium white. I've never used their brands before. So I am testing them based on my knowledge of other paints, and I find them pretty good. So we're gonna just let all these dry again, just like we did with the other first layer. And then we'll come back to it after they're dry. Again, you need to wait at least 15 minutes for this coat of paint to dry. You can use a hairdryer. It takes a lot less time, maybe 3 to 5 minutes for it to dry. So use your time well. And I'm gonna pause. Okay, so I want you to pull out your value charts that you made in the last video or homework. I can't remember when I gave that. So pull out your value charts. And we made two. I made one, the first one, and then I made a second one. And my second one steps more evenly from white or 1 to 5. So what I want to do now is just choose the best 3 from the group that I have made. And I would say, and we got lots of different values in here. I would say this one is closer to a 4 rather than a 3, though it's somewhere between those two. So then I added more white in this one, and I still feel like this one is too dark. So even closer, you know, between these two. This one I actually think works pretty good as a 3. So I'm going to use this one in the painting that I'm going to work on today. And basically, I'm going to give you a little preview. So I did this painting earlier. I didn't have my camera on, unfortunately, but I actually have made this painting before. So this is what we're trying to get to, and this is our reference. But the idea of figuring out your value scale first and then painting is a really good idea. So I'm going to use this box because it's the closest. And one of the things that I find with these paintings is to make them upside down. So instead of making them like this, trying to paint this to this, I always invert it, just like the way we did with our upside down Picassos. And the reason I do this is because it's much easier to appreciate the values when they're upside down rather than worried about the figures or the other parts that may give you trouble. So we're going to do that with this one, and we're going to do another technique. So we're going to upside down it, and we're also going to tile it. And tiling is something that I use to focus my eye on something particular. So what I do is I take the image and I fold it into quadrants. And we have done this in the past before for different projects. And then I'm going to lay down that grid onto our number 3 background. I'm going to move the camera a little closer so you can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to flip this, and then we're going to fold it, and we're going to remember where we are. So let's put our numbers in the boxes. So this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, and this is 4. We go 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'm going to fold it just like this. And I know this is a 1 because I have it here. I have my 1. I should actually put your number exactly where you put it. And then you can copy this information into that box in terms of values. So before I start doing that, I'm going to mix up my paint again because I want 5 values. And I have the 3 already there. 3 is there. So this is the background. is number 3. And from that number 3, I can see areas that are 1s. This is like a 1 here. This is, remember, this is sort of the mid-tone, which we use that as our little blob. And then there's darker areas that are the 4. And then there are really dark areas like the right here along the head will be our 5s. And let me show you, I'm going to do a demo on how I'm going to paint that. Again, I'm painting with a water-soluble mark on a water-soluble background. So that means that I want to keep my marks to a minimum, and I want to lay down the color so that there will be maximum contrast depending on what color it is or what value it is. So let me just do it, and I'm going to pause for a second. Okay, so now I'm going to mix up a 5-step value. I have white. I don't know if you can see that. Let's see. I have white, and I have black. My palette. White is way over here. So, anyways, you know what I'm doing here. And in a perfect world, it would be in a line, just to not confuse me. Now I'm going to mix up. I'm going to leave white the way it is, but I'm going to take a little bit and then add some of that mid-tone that we already mixed. And we're going to make that 2. And I might add a little bit more. And then we're going to mix up a 4, which is the mid-tone, less dark, more dark. That just seems too dark, but we'll just work with what we have. I'm going to add some of that to this. And then ideally, you have the entire background, which is a 3, and that's no big deal. It's already there. Okay, so that's what I'm going to be dipping my brush in. So there's a lot of ways to do this, and you're going to have to test things out for yourself, but I'm going to show you how I do this. One of the things is I usually set a timer. In this case, I might go for 5 minutes per box, and it's up to you how you want to do that. But the idea is that I don't want to spend too much time in the box moving the paint around, because the more I move the paint around, the more it's going to pollute the value. So I'm going to start with, usually what I do is I start with dark first and then go to my lights. So in this case, I never really use the 5 first. I use the mid-tone medium, a 4. So I'm going to paint all my 4s, and you'll see why I do that. So this edge is moving towards the 4 and the 5, so I'm going to put that on first. And then I also see the head is definitely, especially this edge of the head, and maybe even this part will be that 4. And we have this little line goes into it. It's a little square. And for these paintings, I like my round brush. But you can use your square brush if that feels good to you. But the idea is to lay down the strokes in the right value. So that's my putting in my medium, dark, so 4s. Then I go to my medium light, and I'm going to put in my 2s. And this is a process that I have just, this is what my process is. So some people go the opposite direction and go putting their lights down. I always go darks first, and then I put my lights down. And it does depend on the image. So we're putting all the lights in, and we're actually covering it up, the places that will be bright white. So I'm putting the shape around the head, because I know eventually there's like parts that are like a 2 here, but they're going to be parts that are 1s. But I'm just setting up for that. Also, I feel like there's 2s here. There's a little bit of a 2 here. And definitely there's 2s here. Okay, now I'm going to 5. And 5, if you remember, is complete coal black with no white in it. And if you want to go to your pigment box and pull out that, it's a good idea. So now I'm going to look for parts that are the darkest. And in this case, we have a line here, and maybe another line here. Definitely this one is darker than I painted. And you can use a lot of different techniques here. You can use, I know there's like this little part right here is a little darker. There's a little difference here. So I'm going to put that in. There's another dark area here and here. And then this edge moves to dark. This edge in the middle is a little darker. And I'm going to just do some dots here. And let's come over here. This edge is darker. Little shape in this book that's a little bit darker. Looks like here, here. And here I'm just doing little dots or strokes. And it should remind you of making your drills. All right, so then the last section is putting your whites on. Now this is key. You got to get all the paint out of your brush. You know, make sure that when you test the pigment, you're not having any of other pigments in it, just the way we did with the black. So I'm mixing up my white and adding a little water. My water's dirty right now, which so means I'm polluting it, but I'm going to keep going. I'm not going to stop just for the case of this. And now I'm going to put in my bright whites, my bright ones. And one of the things is to notice is, where do the 1s and the 5s actually touch each other? So here they happen around this body, and that is done on purpose by Steven Spielberg, because he wants you to pay attention to the actor. And then, so I'm putting those first, and then I'm going to go back to my 2s, because I do think I want to get certain other shapes. Like there's like a little comma shape in the ear, and that's a little too dark. So I'm going to go back to my mid-tone, see if I can't find that again. Just making little clarifications. There's like a little light part here. Just correcting things as I go. I'm actually painting with the mid-tone right now. Let's put a few little dots here. And when you're tiling, every shape matters. We know this is an important shape. because it's got the darks and the lights right next to each other. That means it's going to be the highest contrast. But we also look for other things that are lower contrast because they're supporting cast. They make this important by backing it up like a chorus. And at this point, I'm pretty happy. Like I would just stop here, and I'll see how long that took for me. But that's the kind of resolution you want, right? So in the next box, so then you can open up your box again and see it. See how close you are. And we're going to do the next box. And what I try to do is really I don't look at the first box at all when I'm painting the second box. I try to keep them very separate, and it pixelizes the image a little bit. But if I pay too much attention to the bottom box like this, I may make a mistake in this box because I'm relying on this box too much. And at this point, I don't really know this box very well. I just had a few minutes with it. So I'm going to spend a little time just painting this box into here. So always start with a dark, medium dark first, so a 4. And you might have to add a little paint to that. And we're going to look for the areas that are darker than the midtone, including the dark darks. And I'm making sure my 2 is in the same place because basically I don't want to paint in the wrong box. Though that could work too. You can come up with something very abstract. So painting over the dark blacks with this 4, and then going back into it after I finish these shadow areas, darker areas than the midtone. And I can see here, see that? That's going to be a highlight too. These are my brightest brights right here, and right here on this image. And right here too, there starts to be something really important happening here. And if you check out what Steven Spielberg is doing, this character is actually making a sculpture. So his hands are really important to this image. So that's why those lighter values are going there. And we right now are painting not those things just yet, but we're putting the ground into making those areas have high contrast. So let's see, I'm kind of confused. So I'm going to go in with my lights. This is going to be 2s. To remember what I'm doing when I'm painting, and I have to correct it as I go. So here's this box, and it does have lights in it, but we're going to use the 2 to go over all the areas with bigger shapes. Again, we know this is going to be pretty light, but instead of using white at this point, we're going to use that 2. And this area, except for maybe one area and a little darkness over here, it's all midtone. So I'm just going to leave it alone. So the problem I see is this is the wrong shape. So I'm going to correct that. And there's something there that's a little lighter. And then oops, that's not what I wanted. So now I'm going to go black into 5s, into my deepest dark, without any paint on it, in my brush, cleaned it out. And now I'm going to put in the dark areas. And there is this dark kind of triangle here that meets with this triangle. And this actually connects a little bit more. And we're gonna have to go over this edge because it's not the right angle. I'm not gonna do it until it dries because I really want a clean mark and I don't want to muddy it. So I keep popping around the image. And here, at this point, there's this area that's darker here too. It's not as dark as here. And I think I want to move this edge out here a little bit more. There's like a little detail here. And it's really hard for you as a viewer to watch me do this and not be aware of this because it's right there. But as a painter, as I'm painting it, I really don't see this at all. Like I just put all my attention here and I just do my best. Right, so now we're gonna go, we just did our 5s, we're gonna go back to our 1s. And I'm gonna put those in. So we just analyze, where do we see these 1s? Only a few places there'll be 1s. And remember, we have to put this little area back between. This has a little lighter in the middle. Now I'm painting really small. I'm gonna fix, I wanna put one dot here. Let's see what's going on this side. And then I'm gonna let it go. Let's compare and contrast these two images. All right, and I could go back and fix a few things, but I'm just gonna keep moving forward because I can always go back at the end and fix things, make it more clear. But right now, we're just trying to keep our brushstrokes simples and our values really separated. All right, so hopefully that'll give you some confidence. And, you know, in terms of my own process, I can do this, watch this. And I feel that I'm moving in the right direction. There are definitely, it's much more hazier in this image, and mine is a little brighter, but I'm not concerned about it at this point. All right, so let's move on to 3. And I'm gonna try to get a little closer for this 3 so you can see it a little, what I'm seeing. So this is an interesting square because we have some perspective in it. And we just did that perspective. Assignment. So you can start to use some of the things that you learned in that assignment here. And one of the things is we have these diagonal lines here. And don't worry about them so much as perspective, but you want to see them as angles. So I'm mixing up, my paint is getting a little dry, so I'm mixing up that 4 again. And I'm going to put 4 down everywhere except for where I see 1 and 2s and 3s. So all this big area, and this is which becomes really exciting for painting, is that you can take a big area and paint it first. Again, I'm not looking at this side. I'm just focusing on this and this. It's almost like I'm making 4 miniature paintings. And by doing that, I am putting my attention equally in each one of those spaces. So, and I'm in 3, thank goodness. And I'm not going to leave this light. I'm going to actually paint it in later. I'm actually going to cover that over. So a very abstract square. Right? And basically, if you know what this image is, this is a TV. And there's the TV. And this is all the clay, and it's all a mess around the TV. The TV is in perspective. It's slightly pointing towards the guy. So basically it is seen in or shortened view. Okay, so now I'm going to your 5, R5. And this is where those angles can become important. So I'm going to start with the deepest shadows now. And I'm going to place this line here. And those are the 2 vertical elements, meaning they're really 90 degrees. Maybe this one's a little less so. Those are, to me, the easiest ones to start with. And then I'm going to do, like, squint my eyes and just see this angle and paint it. All right, so let's go here. All right, so I took a little bit of a break there for lunch, and I was working on this square. And I'm laying in the TV, which doesn't look like a TV. It looks more like a grate. And that's the other thing, is keep looking at these abstractly. Like I can also see like a little, almost like a little face in the TV, which I think is interesting. But it helps me just see the values for what they are. Also, I'm going to move to lights. So I'm going to pause. I need to pause again to wash out my water. I wonder if I can get this a little closer. We can do. Okay, I'm going to try to do this a little closer so that you can see how I handle this shape. Oops, that's not the shape we're working on, this shape. Again, I'm not looking at this image at all. And I could actually put this here and paint. That doesn't feel comfortable for me, so I'd have to paint it right side up, and I really want to keep working upside down. So now we're in number 3, and I am moving on to my lighter colors. I need to mix up a 2. So again, I washed out my water. Every time I go from dark to lighter paint, I gotta wash my brush and I gotta clean my water out. So I'm mixing up a 2. And now we're gonna paint in the light areas. So right here, you've got an area that's definitely a 3, and then this is the 2. So we're gonna just paint that shape, just like a little pea shape, I guess. We have this shape, and I am gonna come back with black, so I'm gonna go paint over this because I want those shapes to be really dark on top. And I can paint even across like that. And next thing I'm going to do is put this line in. Just dab around the whole image. So a little mark here. And there's also a little bit of light, and you'll see this around the edges of things, especially when it comes really close to the darkest darks. You'll see a little bright spot in those areas, and you want to keep an eye out for them. So this, I'm going to just put in some mid-tone here because I feel like that went a little dark. Mid-tone. This mid-tone. And at this point, I'm almost dry brushing. I'm putting down paint and not smoothing it out, just letting it go on. All right, so that's all our twos. And now getting our one titanium white and coming in for, actually, okay, I'm gonna do, yeah, I think I'm gonna go this way. So I'm changing it up a little bit. So I'm putting my whites down first, then gonna let it dry, and then put some in it. And see, I see this area is, it's lighter here and then it gets brighter there. So I'm just gonna dab on there. And when we do all our drills with the little dots, you can use little dots, you can use little hatches. Really up to you. And again, I'm being really careful with areas where black and white intersect or they share an edge, because I know they're going to be the most important things in the image. That's how it's designed. In this case, by the filmmaker. Okay, so I'm gonna let that dry, and I'm gonna add my one last black. I want to add it here and here, but I'm gonna wait for it to dry. So we're gonna come back to this box. And I know I'm gonna go back to all my boxes eventually, so I'm gonna leave it for later. Final box, number 4. So this box we have another diagonal line, which makes up the ceiling. So that's going to be read as a foreshortened line. It's just the way we were thinking about it when we did architecture. But it's very simple because now it's just a shape. Okay, so I'm mixing up our 4. I'm going to paint that in, and I'm going to paint it over all my 4 areas, but also over all my 5s. Which makes me paint much larger shapes at the beginning. And then I can layer the darker areas on top. Which makes it a lot easier to do. It's just an easier process. So we're going to paint the ceiling. There's something dark here. I'm not sure what it is. I think it might be a lamp. It doesn't really matter. It's not going to change the way I paint. And here I'm spreading my paint out, and actually I'm doing a little bit of dry brushing. I'm letting the value of the background kind of come through. And some people really don't like that effect. So it's going to be up to you whether you want to use it or not. I used to hate it. Now I like it. So it takes kind of getting used to. All right, so now I'm going to go in with my lighter value, which is the 2. And I'm going to paint, I'm going to leave the midtone alone, and then I'm going to paint the lights. And in this area, I think I was a little too bold, but the nice part of being bold in the first layer is that you can lay in your lights and correct it as you go. You don't have to be perfect. I actually like this process more than the one-stroke processes because I can work more flexibly. But there are people that really do like one stroke. So if you are one of those people who love calligraphy, use that process. Okay, so now we're going back to the 5, sorry. And I'm getting fresh coal black for my palette. And I'm going to start really focusing on areas like this little shape, which is just a long line. And I tend to compare shapes to states. So this state is like upside down Florida. And then again, we're going to notice where our lights and our darks are going to share edges. And in this case, this is a very important part of the composition because it's showing off this sculpture. What's happening here. And then behind this, we go to 5. And these little shapes, again, I go around the whole image and I see any opportunity to lay in a small bit of 5, I will. Not too much. They're not big shapes. And to kind of look at little differences. So at this point, I would let it dry and stop here. Oh, I have to put my lights in. So again, I'm going to try to clean my water out. I'm going to try not to get any pigment and let only titanium white. I'm going to put our lights in, our lightest lights. Again, this is important. That's what that says to me. This is also important. And the center is more important than I thought it was. So we'll see what happens when we pull the whole image together. So this is what we have, and we're going to unfold the image and just compare them upside down together. And I will make a few adjustments. And usually I don't adjust for any longer than the painting tiling. So I try not to do too much. Let's see if I get this in the right place. So odd. My camera moves the opposite way than I do. So in order to see what's happening, I have to remember that. So those are my two images side by side. And I remember I want to go back into this, but I want to wait till it dries. And you really get a sense of the values and how the filmmaker is actually using their values to show off different parts of the composition. One thing that I noticed between these two is there's a lot more white in this area, which makes sense because you have a person standing in front of a window and it's basically creating a halo around him. So I'm going to fix that and make him, I'm going to make the white a little whiter. Clean my brush off and just side by side painting. I got to move a little bit over. And here I'm going to be crossing the grid. So this is a good way of yoking. I call it yoking the whole painting together. And you get rid of that pixely look by doing a yoking. And I'm just trying to make the brightest areas, the lightest areas look as bright as I can. And you'll see how I'm doing that. I'm adding making the shapes a little more definite and coming across the fold to really enforce that. And now I feel like that relationship is closer to the reference. The other thing is I noticed that he has some light shapes on his face. And the reason why I want to include that is because those light shapes, one is his ear and the other one is the front of his face. And I want actually this to read as a circle, or I would call it a sphere or a little box, three-dimensional box. So we're going to take, it's not bright, so we're going to take some twos and just play along the edge with that. So we're lessening, maybe we'll use actually a 3. We're going to lessen the contrast on this part. Just paint into that area. Also, his neck isn't that skinny, so I'm going to come down here. Also, I remember I was working on these arms that I never really got to. Though in the image, it looks pretty good. Like when I look at it from the monitor, I'm not too worried about those. You might be worried about other things that I'm worried about, but I tend to believe what I see instead of what I think in the past. So always re-evaluating my image, squinting at it. I'm gonna make this a little lighter. This is like a 4 going on top of a 5. And I also want to make, he looks too skinny down here, so I'm going to make the shape a little wider. I know there's a little, this is detail work. This is what I call icing the cake. After you get icing after you've made the cake, you get to ice it. And this is little parts, little things that make a huge difference. Which, this is the part you've been waiting for, just doing the details. Don't forget, And you can't overwork this part, so be careful. Don't go too far. Let it sit. I'm going to actually narrow the head a little bit, and I'm getting too detailed even for this image. But it's hard to stop at this point because you start to see all the mistakes and you want to fix them. And that's the key with paintings. Painting is working from big loose shapes to smaller details over time. And I think this is what people like about painting, that you have to work in a particular order before you get to the details, or else your details will be not in relationship to the other things around the other things. Your details will be in the wrong place and they won't operate as you want them to. So okay, so I'm gonna see if this is dry and then just put those black lines in. This is where things can go really wrong. So I'm just gonna keep my brush moving. And I might practice it a few times off the painting. Like I wanna make this line. So maybe can you see me practice here? Here. And I'm not sure if I need that much pigment, so I want it to be a little drier. Oops, so I did that. Again, you can try it in one stroke, but then you can fix it with little strokes. That's what I do. So I'm doing what I perceive as a very interesting face in the grate. And is there anything else I want to get at? I want to make this ear a little smaller. And there's many things I could do. So keep that in mind as you paint. You can't do them all. You got to decide what it is that you're going to paint and what are you going to leave out. And my position on that is you paint as carefully as you can and take a break at 20 minutes and then come back to it with a fresh mind and then evaluate it then. Never evaluate a painting right after you've done it. Okay. So I'm going to just leave it here because I feel pretty happy about it. There's actually one place that I might work on. This transition between these two edges seems really fractured. So the way I worked on this lighter area, I helped bind these two sides together. So I'm going to choose this mid-tone that I have on one side and just draw it across to this side. I love when you have to paint the mid-tone back in. There's something really satisfying about it. You could think of it as not being efficient, but I would say you're becoming more perceptive of what you're seeing and you're making information, you're capturing more information over time. And that's the process that you have to use in painting. You have to evaluate it in the moment with what information you have. And then let's try to bind the top together a little bit more. And I'm going to do it through this looks like to me a finger pointing like this, right? Hopefully I'm going the right direction. Wait, let's see if I can find it. It's this, see that right here? So we're going to paint that. And again, I'm using this to bridge my two sides. There's something going on in the shape that I don't have it completely. And actually, I'm going to put some of these things on the wall back here. And then I'm going to take some of that lighter. My white was too wet, had too much water in it, and just spread it out. Can't control it. So let's just do a few more things here, here, and then here. And then I'm squinting my eyes now. I'm really trying to find how these shapes all fit together. And I'm going to get rid of this green line. I used a watercolor pencil. And I think I need like 4 or 5 to continue this line over here. And this is an important line because that's the ceiling. So let's just make sure we got it. And then I'm going to come up. It might be that my substructure is too small. I'll have to work on that. And what's this thing? So it'd be nice to go back to the image to see what this is. I think this is some kind of wall ceiling feature. It's not important at the beginning of the painting because you want to see it really abstractly into its basic units. But at this point, I would go back and look at my non-blurry image to do my details. All right, so that's enough of that. And I wanted to show you it right side up in sort of the same place. And at this point, I would transition to a more detailed photograph so that I can really get my details in there. And really a lot of things I noticed, like the gesture, the standing gesture is a little too, like his shoulders are more back and his head is further back on the body. And I can see this is more forward. It looks more like the slouch is going towards the mountain. But actually, when you look at his slouch, it's coming out. It's making a V shape. Wait, let's see if I can do that. It's doing this, which shows maybe, I mean, conceptually, maybe that they're joined in some way, but at the top, they're separated. So that's something to keep in mind. Like, why are these values where they are? Are they just for visual information? Are they for a part of the narrative? And it works both ways. So keep that in mind. Keep thinking about it as you copy things. All right, we're going to leave it there. And I will see you soon.